Hi, I'm Elliot, and I'm the IELTS expert from Magoosh. And today we're going to talk about IELTS Writing Task 1. And we're going to focus on Academic Task 1 essays. So we're going to talk in this lesson all about what you need to know to approach one of these questions. And we're going to look at a sample essay so we can apply some of those things that we've learned. The first thing I need you to do, though, is to open up the link that you see on your screen, and it's also down there in the description box for you. And when you go there, you're going to find a sample task 1 question and a sample response. And I'm going to be referring to those in this lesson. So make sure you go there and open those up so you'll know what I'm talking about. But first, let's begin, after you've got that open, let's begin by looking at some basic information on Task 1, Academic Task 1. So as you may already know, Task 1 is one of two things you need to do for the IELTS writing exam. It's the first task, and it's the shorter one of the two. In fact, it's only worth 1/3 of your total writing score. Task 2, then, of course, is worth 2/3 of your score. Task 1 is shorter, it's only 150 words, and it's recommended you take about 20 minutes to finish this task. So some of my students sometimes ask, well, shouldn't I focus more attention in practicing and preparing for Task 2? And the answer is, well, yes, it is worth more points. But if you're very well prepared for Task 1, you can really do a lot to even help your Task 2 score, because you'll be able to move through the first task so quickly, you'll save time, and you'll be ready to go to answer the more difficult question, Task 2. And I don't want to suggest, though, that Task 1 is easy. It is not easy. It is a challenging question for many students. The thing is, though, that it follows a very definite pattern. And if you master the strategy for Task 1, it becomes easier and easier, and you're going to get better and better scores as you go. So let's take a look at what to do, how to organize your Task 1 essays as we move to the next part of the lesson. So let's take a look at the general approach you should take to Academic Task 1 questions. It really helps you to use a kind of template with these questions. They're very predictable, so your answers will always follow a structure that's very simple and straightforward. Even though the information changes each time, your approach can be very, very predictable. And once you feel really comfortable with that, it becomes easier and easier to answer the questions. So most Academic Task 1 essays have 4 paragraphs. They can be 3 sometimes, but 4 is the most typical arrangement you'll want. So let's talk about each of the 4 paragraphs. So first, paragraph 1. Paragraph 1 in a Task 1 response is where you're simply going to provide a summary of the visual information that's there. You're going to, if there are charts or graphs, you're going to just mention the type of graphs that they are and the basic information about what they show, okay? Often in the question itself, you can get information about things you should report on for this first paragraph, because in the question, it often provides a kind of paraphrase or a summary of what's there in the charts. So what you need to do in paragraph 1 is to do some more paraphrasing yourself, to change around the language in the first paragraph, to put it in your own words, and to report about basically what's there, okay? The challenging part of this is not finding the information. The challenging part is to do the paraphrasing of the language you see in the question and on the visuals that they give you. Okay, paragraph 2 then, this is where you get into slightly more detailed territory, but you don't want to report about any numbers or really specific information yet. Because in paragraph 2, what you're doing is giving an overview of the most important information that you can find in the actual visuals that you're looking at, okay? So if there's 1 chart or 2 charts or some graphs or possibly even some maps that they give you, when you look at them, what trends do you see? What stands out to you most as the most important or the most interesting information that's there? That's what you should report about in part 2. This overview section in paragraph 2 is usually about 3 or 4 sentences long. It doesn't need to be extremely long. It's more important to simply report on the most important trends that you notice. Then, when you get to paragraphs 3 and 4, that's where you take information, specific information, details from the visuals, and you report about those. So if your visuals have numbers of some kind, so if they have detailed information, let's say they're 2 maps that you're comparing, what are the details on the maps that differ, okay? Those are things that you will often need to report about. Or if you notice trends on your charts, this is where you pull those numbers out and you report about them. So what you want to do in paragraphs 3 and 4 is to take that detailed information and to really have an angle on it, to summarize that information and pull it together into a kind of theme. Those numbers should all relate to each other somehow, and you can spend each paragraph 3 and 4, focusing on one of those themes, those angles, and the data that relates to it, okay? This will be really clear when we look at an example essay, which we're going to do next in the next part of the video. So let's take a look at the sample question and the sample response that we have for this video in order to apply the template and to look at how you can apply the Task 1 template. At the beginning of the video, I asked you to click on the link that was on the screen or in the description box to open up the sample question and the sample response. So if you haven't done that already, make sure you do that now, because I'm going to be talking about it in this next part of the video. I've got mine here, and I'm going to be referring to it a little bit as we go through the different paragraphs that we've discussed already for the sample response. Okay, so when you look at the sample question, first things to notice, okay, you've got 2 visuals that are very different from one another, and it's important to understand each one and what information it's providing. The first one is a table, basically, of the different grades at an elementary school that held a fundraiser. Now, hopefully you know what a fundraiser is. A fundraiser is basically an event of some kind, usually, where an institution or organization tries to raise some money for something. Okay, so this school put on a fundraiser to raise money for the school, and we have grades 1 through 6 who put on different activities at the fundraiser to try to raise money. So that's all we get really in that first table that you see there. The second chart then, it's really a pie chart, provides the information about how successful these kids were. So it provides the total percentage of money earned by each class for the fundraiser that they held. All right, so you're supposed to look at those 2 visuals that you have and try to associate them in some way and try to find the important information in them, okay? But first, let's start with paragraph 1, because before we get into all of that analysis, our first task, as we already know, is to simply report about what you see on the 2 visuals, to summarize just the basic information about what's there. And you get that from looking at the visuals themselves and also from looking at the question. So look at the question in the box first, okay? And then look at the very basic information again that we have on the visuals. And notice how in the sample response, all we have there is a paraphrase of the pretty much the direct language that's on these 2 parts of the question. Okay, so in particular, as you look at the first paragraph in the sample response, you'll notice phrases like this. It says the pie chart and the table. Okay, so that's part of the response where you're simply reporting about what type of visual it is. Okay, that's a very basic description of what's there. You also get the percentage of the total money earned in the sample response. Okay, notice how that's a direct paraphrase of what you see in the question. All right, it also says, describes the event as a fundraising event that the school put on. In paraphrasing, you change the language from what's there in the prompt and what's there on the visuals. And that's all we have here for this first paragraph in the sample response. Some paraphrases of that basic information. Okay, but then as we move on to paragraph 2, remember what we're supposed to do is just a little bit of basic analysis. We don't provide details yet, but we need to report on the most important information that's there. So if you look at the sample paragraph 2, I would just point out a number of things. Okay, first of all, the first point that the paragraph makes is to organize the two types of activities for these classes into two categories. There were contests and sales. All right, these are the two basic types of activities that the students put on at the fundraiser. All right, and you can notice that by looking at the table where each class's activity is described just a little bit. Okay, but then what seems to you, as you look at the information, what seems most important to you? Well, for me, when I looked at it, I thought, well, there's a pretty clear picture about which classes contributed most and which contributed least, okay? And that seemed to be the major trend that I noticed, especially on the pie chart. So as you look through paragraph 2, where I summarize the key features, the most important information in that paragraph, those are the things I selected to write the sample response to provide that overview of the most important information, okay? No details yet, and notice there are no numbers there, no percentages, nothing that's really detailed. It's really just basic information in paragraph 2. Okay, then in paragraphs 3 and 4 is, remember from our template, the place where we take an angle on the data, and this is where we can report very specific information about the data that you see on the visuals. So in our sample here, the organizing idea, the angles that we took for paragraphs 3 and 4 are this. Paragraphs 3, we want to look at the most successful activities at the fundraiser, and those happen to be the contests that students put on. So the grades that put on contests did the best at raising money at this fundraiser. Paragraph 4, then, we look at the sales, and that's the angle. How did the classes that put on sales do? And it turns out they did a little, they didn't do quite as well as the classes that did contests. Anyway, those are the organizing ideas. Those are the main ideas of each paragraph for 3 and 4. And all you need to do then is to find the data, to find the numbers or the details from the visuals and report about them in each of these paragraphs, okay? So for paragraph 3, for example, where we look at the contests, it starts off focusing on the numbers related to first and second grade and how well they did with their contests, okay? And then down below in paragraph 4, we see that the book sale, and the third and fourth graders who put on the art sales, they were not as successful as the contests that we had. Okay, you pull out the numbers, you find ways to report about them for each angle, and that's all you need to do for paragraphs 3 and 4. So as we look through our sample response here, you'll notice we hit our minimum word count. We got over 150 words. The first paragraph is only a sentence long. Then we've got short paragraphs as you go. They focus on each of these different parts from our template, right? Overview of the basic information about the visuals and the question in the first paragraph. Second paragraph, we choose the most important data. And then in the third and fourth paragraphs, we select details from the visuals and take an angle on those and report about them in the last part of the essay. Okay, so that was our video on Task 1, the Academic Task 1 essays you need to write for the IELTS. I hope you found it helpful. There's other cool stuff. If you go to the link where you found the sample essay and the sample question, there's more cool stuff to check out there, so poke around there if you'd like. And if you have questions about what you saw in the video, go ahead and ask them in the comment section. We'll be happy to respond.